Hiya, Martin here and welcome to this week's turning project video. I hope you're all well and you have had super creative weeks and weekends in your workshops. Now recently my girlfriend and I decided that we were going to redecorate our living room, and in the corner here above the TV I thought it would be really nice to turn a figurine to stand proudly and elegantly above the telly. And recently I got hold of some metal reactive paints and took some inspiration from Yuval Lahav in Italy with his emerging forms like his goblet and bottle and the emerging hollow form that he demonstrated at the UK and Ireland Woodturning Symposium a few weeks ago, and thought it would be really nice to have an emerging figurine with a bronze dress overflowing the natural edge, and then with a natural edge hat on as well. She was a delight to turn. I'm calling her Grace, as I think she is quite graceful, and it was a lovely project to turn. So I'm not going to talk for ages and ages. If you feel like it, then please do subscribe. I post a video most Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Fridays about wood turning and stuff like that, and please do like, share and, well, yeah, subscribe. But for now, here is how I turned Grace. Last time I had a piece of wood on the lathe as big as this, it jumped off and hit me in the face. So with the roughing down of this piece I'm going to be especially careful. It's about 15 inches long, something like that, and I think it's ash. I'm pretty sure it's ash. And I want to have a natural edge base over on the right hand side here, so I need to make a tenon, a little bit of a waste block, and then the natural edge base, and then the rest of it I'm going to curve and turn into a nice figurine, hopefully in the shape of a tall elegant lady. So let's see how we get on with that. So I've got the lathe set up to run quite slow to start with, and I've got the piece in between centres right along the pith. So I'm going to start really slow. I've got a big lump here which I want to... That's the piece turned down how I want it, and I'm in one piece and my face is in one piece as well. So now I can get it into the chuck so we can begin turning our figurine. And I'm going to leave the tailstock in place for this because it's still a meaty piece of wood. So I've got a nice area here of natural edge that I can play with to create a nice sweeping kind of skirt up into a vague sort of body form, and then up here to the head. So to make the primary kind of roughing cut for the dress shape, or the cone that's going to form sort of a dress shape, I'm going to use the roughing gouge, and then to finish the rest of the shaping I'm going to use the bowl gouge. So this is probably going to be fairly boring, so I will fast forward through most of this and leave you with some pretty music to listen to. Now it doesn't look like much at the moment, But if I grab a pencil, I want the dress to end somewhere around there, maybe a little bit lower, and then come in a little bit and then out again, and then back in fairly sharply, and then the head's going to be kind of at this end. I'm going to leave a nub, or leave a block on the right hand end here, so the head's going to be about there, shoulders, and then into hips, something like that, if you can see that. Something like that ish. So again, here is some pretty music, and I will get on with figuring this shape out. There's our basic figure. I'm quite happy with it. It started wobbling a little bit, so the head started wobbling a bit, so I've got a little bit of sanding to do down there, but overall I'm very happy with how she looks. Now I'm going to sand it down and finish the top half of her. The shape is a little bit different from when you last saw it. I've sort of slimmed her down a little bit, as I wasn't happy with the really big meringue dress. So I've slimmed the dress down a little bit, but I've opened up the pith here, look. So I'm not overly worried because this is going to be painted anyway, but I will run some CA glue in there just to give it a little bit of strength. So I'm going to put some thin CA glue over it. In each of the knots. And then I'll carry on sanding down. Here she is sanded down to 400. Now I've only sanded her down to sort of mid-waist, as that's where I'm going to put her skirt. So the top half is sanded down to 400, and I'm just going to clean the grain with some methylated spirits, and then I'm going to take sanding sealer, and this is a cellulose sealer and thinners mix at about 80-20, and rub that in. I'm not going to worry too much if it goes a little bit further down the piece, because I want the skirt to look rustic and perhaps a little bit pre-Raphaelite, flowing, you know, that sort of thing. So I'm not worried if the paint comes off down there. Right, there we are. I'm going to let that dry off, and then I'll cut it back and apply Oh, I think I'll use Hampshire Sheen for a change. In fact, that's actually pretty dry already, so I'm going to take a 9-web pad, just cut it back a little, dust it off, and then get the Hampshire Sheen High Gloss. The natural edge base of this is making the lathe wobble. There. I'm liking that. I'm liking that very much. Now. Right, next step. Now, the last time I used the oxidizing paints, I didn't use any of the primer. So I thought with this piece I would use the primer to create kind of like the basic sort of skirt shape that I want. So I've got an old paintbrush, and I'm just going to, I don't want it too uniform sort of thing. I want it, as I said a little while ago, a little bit sort of pre-Raphaelite, so I want sort of raggedy edges. Sort of thing, so I'm not going to worry too much about the shape or the coverage, if that makes sense. I want it rustic looking, but kind of pre-Raphaelite-y, if that makes any sort of sense at all. And where I've got a longer side to the dress there, I want to pull the dress down there a little bit as well. In fact, I'm going to have the dress come over the side of the natural edge. Just like that. Now I need to let that dry before I can apply the bronze paint to it. I've now given the paint a stir, and I'm going to apply one coat, or the first coat, to the piece and let that dry, making sure that I cover all of the primer. And I'm trying to make sure that all of my brush strokes go in the same direction, so the particles in the paint are all going in the same direction, and that came off the manufacturer's website. There, I think that looks super. Right, next I need to let that dry completely, then I'll put on a second coat just to make sure that all of the primer is covered up. Then I'll part it off, and then finally we'll do the wet coat of paint plus the spritzing, or the spraying of the patina. Right, here she is all parted off, and I've sanded the bottom down as well, and the paint is all dry. But now I've got to do this fairly quickly, because I've got to spray the blue patina onto the piece when the paint is still wet. So she's feeling good, the paint's nice and dry, and now I'm just going to put the bronze paint on. Now what I learnt with the last project I did using these was, and doing my fireplace, is you need to sort of layer on a fair amount of paint in order to get a good reaction. And also, the more paint you put on, the longer it stays being wet. That will do for that. Now I've got the blue patina, so the instructions say just spray it on. So I'm not going to worry if it runs or anything like that, because it kind of all adds to it. And then take a little bit of towel and just wipe it off the wax, because I forgot to shield it. So I'll leave it now for a few hours, probably overnight, and then come back and see how it looks. So I have left the piece overnight, and here she is. I am so pleased with how the blue patina has come out on the bronze paint. I'm really chuffed, but she doesn't look quite right. I'm going to turn her a hat out of this piece, and I'm going to keep a natural edge on the brim of the hat. So first of all, what I need to do is create a tenon so I can flick it round in the chuck and work on the inside of the hat first. There we are. Now I need to measure the diameter of Our Lady's head, so I'll use the calipers for that. Just sort of at the top of her head, 27.54, so let's call that 28. 28, divide that by 2, that's 14. So if I do 14 millimeters, which is about there, I need to take a scoop out of there go. I think that will look lovely, actually. I'm very pleased with that, so I can just sand that down. In fact, I may not even bother sanding it, because I'm going to paint it and the paint goes all sort of textured like that. I don't think I'll really bother. So I'll now paint that. I'll follow the same procedure with the primer and the 2 coats of primer, and then 2 or 3 coats of the bronze, and then the spray. So while that's drying off, it's virtually there. I think I might help it along a bit with the heat gun, because it is looking pretty good. Oh yeah, that is good. I like that a lot. Right, so now that is virtually there, I'm going to take this bit down to make the little hat bit of the hat, or the head bit. Okay, now I can start. It's nice and it's fairly even. Yeah, that feels good. And now I can start curving round the top. It's not going to be very big, but I just need to curve around the top up to about there somewhere. Right, I'm happy with the shape of the hat now, and I just need to part it off in here really carefully, trying to follow the line of the hat. I'm really pleased with that. That's a very elegant looking hat, I think. Right, next step. Because the rim is really quite thin, it's about 3-4 millimeters, I want to dribble a little bit of CA glue around the edge of the bark. So I've balanced the hat on a rubber ball. I'm going to run some CA around the edge of the bark, which will hopefully keep it in place. Looks like a little sombrero, doesn't it? Right, so I'm going to let that go off. I'll put the primer on, the bronze paint, and then the spray, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Right, okay, I've done the hat, and here is the top of Grace. I'm calling her Grace, by the way, because I think she's quite graceful in her dress and her hat. Right, in the top of her head, I've put one of these picture frame hook things, nails. So that just sits in the top of her head. And here is the hat. There's the top of the hat, and there's the bottom of the hat, all finished. So the idea with the picture pin in the top of her head is so we can adjust the hat and turn the hat around however we want to, and it still sits in position. But for now, I think I like Grace to look like so. And here is Grace in all of her antique bronze glory. I hope you enjoyed today's project and found some inspiration from it perhaps, or maybe learnt something from the very beginnings of my journey with the reactive paints from Modern Masters. I really enjoyed turning Grace. It was a lovely project to do, and thank you Yuval Lahav for your inspiration of your emerging forms for me to create Grace in the first place. Please do like, share and subscribe, and if you feel so inclined then please do leave a comment. I always do my best to reply to all comments as soon as I possibly can. But for now, from Grace and me, I'll see you soon. Bye for now.